All right, guys, welcome back to the Game Trail Podcast. I appreciate you guys listening. I had several messages from folks that listened to the Matt Tillotson podcast, which was awesome. Matt's a good dude, and I wish him nothing but the best. I think he's still got some tags in his pocket, so I'm interested to see how he does in the future. But appreciate the guys that have reached out, that listen. Also, if you guys like the podcast, if you're picking up maybe some tips and tricks, giving you something to listen to on your long drives, I would love it if you would leave a review, which I'm finding out helps the algorithm or whatever it might be to help me continue to do podcasts. So leave me a review if you like it. I guess even if you hate it, shoot me a message. Let me know what I can do better. With that, this is going to be a solo episode this week. I guess before I get going, I'm going to hit promo. You guys can use the promo code GameTrail. That's GAMETRAIL if you want to sign up for a GoHunt Insider account. When you do that, you're going to get 50 points back in the GoHunt Gear Shop. You can also use that code GameTrail if you're already a member and you want to save 10% off on most products that we have available in the Gear Shop, some of which I'm going to talk about today. Maybe you'll want to pick up and you could use that discount, or if you sign up for a new Insider account, you could use those $50 towards the purchase of some of these products that I might talk about today, which have been game changers for me over the years. As well as Matthews. So I should also note that Matthews is a sponsor of the podcast. I'm excited for what those guys have got in the works, and you'll be hearing more about that in the coming weeks. I would say middle of November. You guys will get a chance to see what they've got in the works for this coming 2026 year. I think you guys will be excited about it. I know I certainly am. Getting ready to go on another late season hunt. I've got a late season archery elk tag in Arizona. My 12-year-old also has a late season rifle elk tag in Arizona that he drew on his first year. So since we're moving into those late season hunts, something that's been on my mind, and I recently did a video about it, was optics. And optics, I really think, are pieces of equipment that you should feel good about pouring good money into. At the end of the podcast, I'm going to give you a full cost breakdown on what I'm into with the optics that I use. I personally think I have the best optic system for me and the style of hunting that I like to do. It becomes really important, like I said, as you move into those late season hunts, whether you're hunting deer or elk. We're getting ready to kick off those second and third rifle seasons in Colorado. Those are coming up. You also got those November deer hunts in states like Montana. So there's still a lot of late season hunting to be done. And like I said, I've got those late season hunts that are coming up. And, primary means of hunting on those late season hunts is glassing, because those animals, if you're hunting mule deer, their coats are really gray this time of year. They blend into the environment really, really well as everything kind of starts to transition and change. The leaves are all, coming off the trees. You might get a dusting of snow. It just makes those mule deer really tough to see. And good glass, steady glass, being comfortable, being able to be out there for as long as you possibly can is really the difference maker in being able to find deer. Elk also, they kind of quit bugling. I'm not sure if they bugled much at all this year. At least for me, it didn't feel like they did. I know that I've talked to several guys since we got home from Wyoming that said that they, got into some bugling bulls, which is great. And I say that tongue in cheek. I know elk rutted. We heard some bugles. We had a couple days where it seemed like they were going. But once they move into October, November, they're kind of bachelored up, or those bigger bulls are even maybe holed up by themselves. They like to find that steep, deep, nasty country where they can find a pocket of feed and stay away from hunters and stay away from pressure, and really just try to recuperate and put on body weight. They don't move much during the day, especially if they're not pressured. So really your best means of finding those is going to be glassing once you get into October, November. I was talking to a guy at a gas station this morning who stopped to get a coffee, and he killed a good bull on the mid-season hunt, and he said that already by kind of that middle of October, he killed a great bull, by the way, probably mid 360, 370, I would say, but he was already seeing bulls that were bachelored up, or, the bull that he killed was kind of off by himself, I believe. But, yeah, they're really starting to find refuge. And like I said, your best means of finding elk or deer during those late season October, November hunts is glassing. And so your glass becomes really important. If I go back to my history with binoculars and with glass, the first pair of binoculars I ever remember getting or using when I was a kid, we had a pair of Nikons, and they were a 10 by 32, I believe, just the Poro prisms, the old style. Real simple. For a lot of years, we never even had binoculars. Anything that we would look at would be through the rifle scope, which certainly I don't recommend. But as a kid, that was kind of the means of looking at deer. And, as we've progressed, we've moved along. I think everybody's natural inclination is to, buy the best glass that they can afford, which a lot of cases when you're a college age kid, might not be the best option. But what I would say in regards to buying optics is buy the best optics that you can. Obviously that still holds. I also still think that it's some of the best money that you can spend in hunting. You can get by with a lot of different equipment, including different types of shelters, even sleeping bags. There's some more economical options out there. You can get through the night. Depends on how many nights you're doing and how, effective or how warm you want to sleep. But you can get by. Same with hunting clothing. There's a lot of really good technical hunting clothing on the market. You can certainly get by with some cheaper versions. I know guys that hunt in some of these Wrangler hiking pants that you can get at Walmart, and they do great. I mean, you can get by on a lot of different gear, but in my opinion, optics is an area that it's a real difference maker, and I think it makes good sense to spend money, even to the point where if you got to save, if you got to, sell some stuff, you got to do some side jobs, whatever it is, save up your money and get the best glass that you can possibly afford. Cause that's one of those items in my hunting kit that really makes the biggest difference. So my history, my brother, I remember my oldest brother, Todd, he ended up saving up, and he got he went into a store actually to buy a pair of Swarovskis. And I can't remember if he was planning on buying the ELs at the time, or it might've been the SLCs, but he walked into a shop to buy a pair of those. He'd saved up his money and ended up testing some different binoculars off of a tripod. And ultimately, he ended up walking out of there with a pair of Leica Ultravid 10 by 42s. This is before they were HDs. And I remember the first time I looked through his binoculars, I was blown away. Just how crisp and clear those were, how vibrant the view was. And I thought, yeah, this is incredible. This is a difference maker. And so I was in college at the time. I remember convincing my wife to use our entire tax return one year to buy a pair of Leica Ultravids. I still have them, still use them. My kids use them. They're the green rubber kind. If you've ever seen those back in the day when they made those, but an incredible set of glass that reality is going to last me forever if I wanted to continue to use them. Now I've added some different optics to my kit. And like I said, I think personally for me, I have the, what I would call the ultimate glassing kit. It really works well for my style of hunting. But optics is one of those pieces of gear. When you spend the money on really good glass, it's going to last you forever. I mean, you're going to have them for 20, 30 years, to be honest. And, I can hand those down to my kids. My kids could probably hand them down to their kids, to be honest. The glass is incredible in those. And, they update, they add new coatings. Maybe the field of view gets a little bit better. Some of the magnifications might change, but you could still use those glass, forever, and they're still going to provide really clear, crisp imagery. So I can't honestly pound this home enough. Good glass is a big difference maker, and the longevity you get out of those things, I think, makes it worth it to spend the money. Now, they're not cheap. I knew that they weren't cheap. For this podcast, I actually went through and kind of added up the glassing system that I use, and I got sticker shock, to be honest. I was blown away. I was like, I can't believe, I've put that much money, to be honest, into optics. It's a lot of money. But it's worth it. And if you want to hunt, you want to continue to hunt, you want to be effective at it, I honestly believe that it's the best money spent in hunting. So with that, I'm going to run through and just kind of tell you what it is that I use. I'm going to answer some of the questions that people sent to me after I did a little video. I think it was a reel that went up on Instagram. I basically just ran through my optics setup, but I'm going to answer some questions that people ripped off to me and kind of address those on why I choose what I choose, and hopefully, the logic makes sense and you guys can make your own judgment on what works best for you. So with that, what I use. So chest rig. So binocular harness around your chest. I think everybody should have a set of binoculars on their chest that they can easily get to. For me, I don't think that there's a better option out there on the market than the marsupial gear enclosed bino harness. For one, it works really, really well. It opens to the front, so it's easy one-hand operation. So if I've got a rifle in one hand or my bow in my left hand, I can easily get to my binoculars and I can put them back in that case without making a lot of added movement or noise. It's got the magnets on the top that are going to hold it closed. It also has magnets on the bottom that you pop that lid open. It's going to remain open as long as you want it to. And I love what Jim's doing with marsupial. I mean, it's American made. This guy's sew everything in Arizona, and he's just a good dude that's created an awesome product and, passion project, to be honest. I love what that guy's got going on. So for me, it's the marsupial. I think it's the best option out there. Along with that, I've got a rangefinder pouch also from marsupial. And saying that, the marsupial rangefinder pouch is probably not my favorite. It's functional. It works. I wish it had a little bit more form to it, to be honest. But it works, and it works well with my rangefinder that I've got. So inside my chest rig, I have been using a pair of SIG Zulu 6 image stabilized binos in a 12x42 configuration. A little bit later, I'm going to touch on why I choose those for my chest rig. Secondarily, during those late season hunts, I've gotten to a point where I've been packing a second set of binoculars. And the second set of binoculars I use is a pair of Swarovski SLC 15x56s. I pack those in my backpack, and it's added weight. I'm going to touch on the weight later on. I'll run through the weights of all of these, and I'll also dive a little bit more deep into why I, pack a second set of binoculars. The next item that I pack is a Swarovski spotting scope. So it's a Swarovski ATS HD 20x60x65. It's the angled version. I like the 65 millimeter objective because it's a little bit lighter, and that's primarily the reason I choose it. But again, I'm going to dive into that a little bit later. I'll go item by item and kind of tell you why I choose what I choose. Along with your optics, so a spotting scope, and then a set of glass like the Swarovski SLC 15x56s. I think you ought to have a tripod. Now, with the invention and utilization of image stabilizing binos, I think there are people out there that are like, well, now I can just get away with a pair of image stabilizing binos. And I will admit that the stability in those SIGs is incredible. It's as steady, to be honest, than a set of 10x42s or a pair of 15s mounted on a tripod. So the stability is definitely there. The difference is that you're just not as comfortable. It's a lot easier to sit there on the ground behind a tripod. You can operate the tilt and the pan, the left and right, with one hand, and you can rest your arm on the tripod legs. So it's just more comfortable. So that's the one advantage that I think a tripod has over just the image stabilizing binos on their own. So if you can imagine using a set of image stabilizing binos, you got to hold those up to your face. You can mount them on a tripod. That's certainly an option. But, if you're going to use them without one, you got to hold those up to your face. You can do it with one hand, just one hand. One arm gets tired. Your left arm, I'm right-handed. My left hand isn't as stable. And if you use two hands, you just get tired. Like, you can rest them on your knees and that works for a while, but you're kind of bent over. Whereas a tripod allows you to kind of adjust your positions throughout the glassing session. Maybe you can find a good tree to lean up against, or, if you're into a hillside and you're looking uphill, you can actually kind of lean back into it and relax and get your tripod configured so that you're comfortably glassing. And like I said, you can do it with one hand really comfortably. So I still pack a tripod. The tripod that I like and I use is the Tricer AD, the tripod legs. And then for a tripod head, excuse me. For a tripod head, I'm using the Tricer LP tilt pan. So that's a really lightweight setup, super simple. Again, I like Drew and I like what he's got going on over at Tricer. I think he has a well thought out product. There's some design features in his tripod which I like, which is, the larger section of the legs is towards the bottom. The carbon's good. They're super lightweight, and I'll run through the specs on that tripod, the overall weight. Moving down to the rangefinder. So the rangefinder, I'm using a Sig Kilo 8K rangefinder. It's got a bright red reticle in that you can see in really low light, which is nice. It does have the capacity to reach out to definitely further distance than I would ever shoot, or my kids would ever shoot with a rifle. It's accurate. It also has the archery mode, which is great. I can go and input my bow's foot per second into that, and it's going to give me the calculated angle compensation on that. So it works well. And I know I'm primarily a bow hunter. I do some rifle hunting mostly with my kids, but I like the fact that I can do both with that rangefinder. And then lastly, one other little piece of gear that I would add to my glassing kit that I should note is this little ASIAC bino tripod adapter for my SLC 15x56s. And it's basically a little clamp, and it's got a arc plate configuration kind of already built into the bottom of it. You just basically slip that over, you tighten it down with a set screw and nut, and it just clamps onto your binos, and it clips immediately into the tripod head, which is great. It works super well. It's really lightweight. Again, I'll touch on the weight here in a bit, and it's actually not that expensive. It's relatively cheap for what you get, and I think it's the simplest, easiest way. You don't have to buy, any extra plates. You don't have to mount a stud in the front part of your binoculars. It's just simple and it works. People ask me like, oh, if you put it on one barrel of your binos, isn't it weird that it's kind of mounted off to one side, the binoculars, when you put them on the tripod? Initially, when you look at it, it's a little bit weird, but to be honest, I don't notice it at all, that offset. It actually kind of works nice because I like to face my handle on my tripod head away from me so that I can manipulate and use that with my right hand. And I'll put my binocular clamp for the tripod head on the right barrel of my binoculars, and it kind of offsets it. So it's actually really nice because my right hand just sits nice on the handle, on that tilt pan handle of the tripod head. And then, my binoculars are right there, and it's actually really comfortable. So I don't notice any issues with that. So diving into different types of glassing, I don't know what to exactly call this, but in recent years, I would kind of break up my glassing setup into what's evolved into what I would call different categories. So I look at it in terms of one, so my ability to find an animal. Two, my ability to evaluate an animal, being able to see them well enough that I can track them to their bed. If I'm stalking a mule deer on a bow hunt, something like that, I want to be able to actually have enough detail and zoom that I can track that animal to an exact bed so that I know exactly where they are, so that I can plan my stalk and execute it. And then three, I would say the final approach. So the final stalk when I'm actually working in on an animal, and that can be with a rifle. Maybe I want to get 300 or 400 yards, even closer would be better. But that final approach, and it becomes even more important when you're stalking a deer or an elk for that matter. If you're calling elk and you got a bull coming in, you want the ability to pick up hide and horn as they're kind of moving through the timber. So that final approach, that final distance is what I would call my third step. So three different categories, I would say. One, the ability to find the animals, just glass and find animals. Two, the ability to evaluate. If I'm looking for antler size on an elk or a deer, which, I wouldn't mix any words about it. I am interested in finding the best buck or bull that I possibly can. And, that's something at this stage in hunting that it's important to me. Like, I'm looking for a big mature animal. So I want the ability to evaluate the antlers. I also, like I said, I want to be able to evaluate exactly where they're located and bedded so that I can plan my stalk. And then three, that final approach. You got to have glass that's great for that final approach. So finding animals. So for finding animals in that mid to late season, it requires, long glassing sessions in a lot of cases. And for that, I need to be comfortable. I already talked a little bit about the tripod, but I need that stability. I need good magnification. I need brightness. I need clarity. especially in that dawn and dusk time frame. I need to be able to evaluate the finer details. An antler tip that's moving, or just that movement of a gray hide on a gray sagebrush landscape, maybe an animal that's moving in a shadow. I need that detail. I need the ability to have clean, crisp views. And I also need to be able to pick up enough light. I need enough field of view that I can do that. So this is where I kind of dive into, maybe why I do a lot of my glassing through those Swarovski SLC 15x56s. I primarily use those for finding animals. And the reason that I'm using those is because, one, that product is incredibly bright and incredibly clear. The field of view is good. The optics themselves, the glass, the coatings, I would say Leica, Swarovski, Zeiss, maybe the SF versions are really the best in class as far as overall brightness and clarity. The SIGs are great. The Sulu 6s, the new HDXs, they definitely made massive improvements in the clarity in that glass. But in my opinion, it's still not quite on par with, the big three, a Swarovski, a Leica, or a Zeiss. So that's why I choose that 15x56 in a Swaro, is just the clarity. And I can really pan, and, I can go left or right, up, down. I can pick apart landscapes, and I can really see a lot of detail. They gather a lot of light, and they're incredible. So that is it's my primary method of finding, late season mule deer, late season elk. And like I said, it comes at a cost at weight, but I definitely think they're worth it. Along with that, the tripod. So I already mentioned it, but that Tracer AD with the LP pan head. Now, when you look at that setup, it's not the most robust out there. There are definitely tripods, and I own another tripod, I should say. I have one other tripod that's definitely a much more heavy-duty, sturdier option. The leg diameter in that is definitely a lot bigger. It's much more stable, especially when you get a little bit of a breeze. But the reason I choose the AD and LP pan head, which is one of the most lightweight options, is because it's stable enough that I can glass, and I can also put my spotting scope on there. And it stays stable. It's not the most stable, but it does the job. So it's like a trade-off, right? So it's a trade-off between weight savings, and giving me enough stability that I can comfortably glass, that I can comfortably evaluate an animal through the spotting scope. Knowing full well that it's not going to offer me the stability, but it's a sacrifice I'm willing to make based on the the weight. So it's kind of my choice in tripods. And I've tried, like I said, other tripods. I own other tripods, but inevitably I almost always go back to that AD head, legs, and the LP pan head. It's tall enough that I can glass through it, although I could probably count on one hand the number of times that I've actually spent much time glassing from a standing position. Almost always it's more comfortable, it's more steady, and I'm much more patient if I sit down and get comfortable. So I could actually even probably drop down to the lighter weight version, the shorter legs, and probably get away with it. But I do have that one. I use it with the center column. I love a center column because I can move that center column up and down without having to adjust each individual leg separately to, adjust the height if I want to look at a different area, or I want to put my spotting scope on it and evaluate an animal and I need to make an adjustment on height. I can do that without moving each individual leg. So that's the tripod setup. And like I said, that is pretty much my go-to in terms of finding animals late season. So SLC 15x56 and the Tracer tripod and tripod head. And that brings me to evaluating. So depending on the distance, you might be able to see a buck or a bull, and you might be able to see enough detail that you can evaluate them through a set of 15x56s. But the reality is, in most cases, I want to look in more detail. I might want to get some digiscope footage. And I think a spotting scope is worth its weight in gold. I use it a lot. In terms of actually breaking down how much time I glass through the set of 15 by 56s versus a spotting scope, it's probably a 95-5 split, to be honest. I spend most of my time looking through those 15s. I might only spend 5% of the time looking through a spotting scope. But when you're really wanting to try to evaluate an animal, you need that extra power, well above and beyond a 15 power. The reason that I choose the Swarovski scope is, one, because it is bright, it's super light, gathers, the image is incredible. It's one of the only 65 millimeter scopes that I'm aware of that you get a 20 by 60 zoom. A lot of those that are smaller objectives, like a 65 objective, is only going to give you maybe 16 to 20 to maybe 48 power. So I like the added magnification that I get from that Swarovski. The reason I don't choose a larger objective is weight savings. So you get to those larger objectives, like an 85 millimeter. I think they might even make a 90 or 95, to be honest. And then you got guys like Brady who, they even might dip into that 115 millimeter objective. These get really heavy. And I do a lot of, backpack style hunting. I do a lot of hunting where I like to hike out away from, roads and other people and try to create some space and, try to find a buck or a bull that's tucked away, that hasn't really been messed with or pressured or looked at. And so I'm looking for some weight savings where I can get him, and I'm willing to make some trade-offs. So I know that those smaller 65 millimeter lenses are definitely not as bright at dawn and dusk. They're great during midday. Even early, they're pretty good, but I could gain some if I went to a larger objective, but it's just not a trade I'm willing to make because of the extra weight savings. I've tried them. I've looked through the 80s. They're awesome. I just don't want to pack the extra weight, and the 65 millimeters do everything I want, which is give me that ability to evaluate a buck or a bull and, kind of reach out there and see them with that magnification. So that's the reason I go with those. I love an angled spotting scope. If you think about, hunting the mountains of the West, you're looking uphill, you're looking downhill most of the time. It's pretty rare when you get straight line of view. So you can imagine that angled spotting scope eyepiece gives me the ability to much more comfortably look uphill or downhill because of the angle. Now, it does take some time and effort to get used to looking and finding animals through that angled eyepiece. I do a lot of, looking and then, getting my eye back in the scope. So I don't think it's necessarily as quick as a straight eyepiece, but it's a whole lot more comfortable, and it's something that is learned. So you get a lot better at it. It takes some practice, but once you get the hang of it, you can pretty quickly acquire the animal without too much effort. And I think it's a trade-off it's worth making just for comfort and the ability to watch longer. Like I said, one of the things that I use a spotting scope a lot for is, evaluating antlers, size of an animal. And then above and beyond that, I use it quite a bit for actually keeping track of an animal and trying to put that animal into a bed or into a location that I can actually execute a stalk. If I think back to a buck I killed a couple of years ago on the bow hunt, general season unit here in Utah, I found that buck in the evening, maybe an hour before dark. I watched him that evening through the spotting scope, just trying to get a really good idea of, what he was and kind of where he was hanging. I was able to pick that buck up first thing in the morning at light, through my 15 by 56s, immediately threw on my spotting scope, got him in the scope. I got some footage. And then probably for like the next hour and a half, I just watched that buck feed, trying to figure out exactly where, he was going to end up. And there were a lot of times when he would dip into the timber, and I would have to use the magnification, the zoom of that spotting scope to be able to pick up, a little movement to just to know where he was at, because really keeping track of him is so paramount. It's so key when you're planning a stalk on an animal. And then ultimately I was able to end up, putting that buck to bed. And because I had that spotting scope and, that magnification, I was able to know exactly what tree he was bedded under, what direction he was facing. And all those details are really key to helping you be successful in your stalk. I mean, little tiny details like the direction they're facing is so key to know which way you should approach. So that's really where a spotting scope shines, in addition to, being able to evaluate an animal. There's a lot of good spotting scopes on the market. My very favorite, like I said, is that Swaro, just due to the optics of it, the added magnification, and then, the focus on it being that the body, the focus is actually on the body. It's a lot easier. The ergonomics of it are easy to use. So that's kind of my approach to a spotting scope. And then finally, closing the distance. So this is where I think these Sig Zulu 6s are hands down, for me, the best tool out there. I recently listened to another podcast where the individual was saying, I don't know if those Sig Zulu 6s are the best tool for glassing. Generally, like general glassing, I would think if you're going to buy one pair, you could buy one pair of those Sig Zulu 6s, either the older style or the HD X's, the new ones. You could mount those on a tripod and you could use one set of binoculars. But where I really, really think that they shine is offhand glassing, and offhand glassing specifically in a closing stocking situation. So for me, I guess if you can imagine, right? So a couple years ago in Colorado, I'm hunting elk, and it's thick. It's a burned area. There's a lot of standing dead because the burn's not that old. It's a lot of standing lodgepole. The gaps between the trees are relatively tight. There's a lot of cases where you could probably only see maybe 80 to 120 yards, and you get a bull bugling and you kind of work in on him. You got the wind in your favor, your cow calling a little bit, you show some interest, and he starts walking in. In those situations, you're looking for movement. You're trying to pick it up with your naked eye, but you can't really tell exactly. This type of situation is where those Zulu 6s really shine, is because you can put those up to your eye. You get the image stability, completely stabilizes your field of view, and you're able to pick up those small details like an antler tip moving through the trees, or even the body of an elk. I don't know how many times I would put those things up to my eyes and I would be looking through the trees and I would pick up a little piece of hide, and it might only be 80 or 100 yards, to be honest, but without those, I'd have never seen it. Mule deer, another example. You're closing in on a buck. This last week I took my kid out, and we got him into a shooting situation where he was about 300 yards from this buck. I can't hold a standard, like regular set, even good glass, like my old Leica Ultravids. I can't really hold those steady, especially when I'm excited enough, even at that distance, to see as well as I need to maybe call out a shot for my kid. That's when those Zulu 6s are incredible. I can pull those up. I can flip on the button that stabilizes the image, and I have the ability to see that animal, to call shots, to plan a final stock, to tell all those details that I need, like the direction he's facing, is he quartering away, quartering to, all those types of details you can pick up so easy with those Sig Zulu 6s. So I think that's a major, major advantage. It's probably been one of the biggest, technological advances in optics in my lifetime, to be honest. I still prefer, like I said, a Swaro. I still prefer the glass and the Swaro, the brightness off a tripod. But for the actual closing, the actual stock, for offhand glassing, maybe you're walking up a ridge and you just want to take a quick look at a hillside across from you before you actually get up to your main vantage glassing point. You can throw those Zulu 6s up to your eyes and you can very quickly evaluate a landscape so much more effectively than we could historically. So that's where I think those really shine, and they kind of make the most sense for me, is that final approach for that offhand glassing. Now, this is another question I get quite a bit is, what model of Zulu 6 should I get? Should I get the 12 by 42? Should I get the 16 by 42? Should I get the HDX? There's the newer ones with the larger objectives. They're going to gather more light. For me, I like the 12 by 42s. So I've tried the 16s, the older styles. For me, I like the 12s. It's enough magnification, like I said, for that final approach, for that final stock, for offhand glassing. The 16s for me, they aren't quite as bright. especially at dawn and dusk, because of that relationship between the magnification and the objective lens. The field of view is about the same, to be honest, between those two. So it's not like there's a major advantage when it comes to the 12s in that regard. Really, for me, it's just that they're a little bit brighter. They gather more light, and again, it's that exit pupil. It's that relationship between the magnification and the objective size of those lenses. So I like the 12s. I personally think they're like the best do-all type of binocular to have in your chest rig, and you've got those at hand. Now the new binoculars, the HDXs, that's a nice set of glass. My preference is still the older style. I like the original version. They're a little bit lighter. They only require one battery versus two. I think the battery life seems to be a little bit longer in them. They fit better in a regular smaller size chest rig. I think the ergonomics of them are a little bit better in one hand when you're using them to glass. So for me, I like the old style, and they're actually a little bit cheaper as well. Certainly if you're going to buy one pair and you wanted better glass and, you wanted to mount those on a tripod and use them offhand during, the stocking portion of your hunt, probably the HDX is a better option. So the newer ones, but I like the older ones. And like I said, that's my primary use case scenario for those is, offhand glassing while I'm hiking, and then final approach. They make a huge difference. So with that, I kind of broke down my whys. I think if I had to wrap that all up in a bow, I would tell you SIG makes a great binocular. The glass is good. I don't think it's as good as far as clarity, crispness, brightness as the big three, like a Swaro, a Leica, and maybe the Zeiss SFs. And I still prefer one of those brands off of a tripod. I like the 15 SLCs because I get the magnification. I have the large objective. I got a lot of light that comes through those things, and the image that those generate is incredibly crisp and incredibly clear. They're also really comfortable off a tripod. Spotting scope, I do think you need one, especially if you're concerned or interested in quote unquote trophy hunting, which I am. I am trying to kill the best buck or bull that I can find. I think you need to make some decisions as far as trade-offs, weight, your style of hunting. Like I said, I like to do a lot of packing around, and so I'm going to choose a lighter weight option, which is why I choose that 65 millimeter. Tripod, again, you want to have enough stability that it does what you need to, which is, stabilize my 15 by 56s, and then also, is stable enough that I can use my spotting scope off of it, but I'm also trying to cut some weight because of the style of hunting that I like to do. And then, like I said, I don't think there's a better tool in your arsenal than those SIG Zulu 6s for that final approach and that final stock. So that's the reason I choose what I choose. I think I had some people that asked me, why not choose a 16 by 50 HDX SIG for just one set of binos to do everything? Well, I kind of already touched on it, but I don't think there's clear off of a tripod. So that's one reason, even though you get the magnification. They're also, they're pretty bright, but I do think the Swaros or the Leicas are brighter. I think they're clearer. The image is better. So that's one reason I prefer those. The other reason I don't just use those for one do-all is that in one hand, for a final approach, the ergonomics, they're a little bit big. They're a little bit heavy. They're a little bit harder to use with one hand during that final approach. And then that 16 power zoom with a 50 millimeter objective is a little bit too much for me in a bow hunting situation, which is what I do a lot of. So I like the smaller, lighter 12 by 42 original Zulu 6s because they don't have, the bigger magnification, and they're a little bit easier to manipulate with one hand and really see. So that's the reason why I'm choosing, two different things, knowing full well that it comes at a cost of the extra weight. But that's why I choose what I choose. And like I said, I think it's over the years, I've tried a lot of different optics. I've kicked can down the road on, trying some different things. And ultimately I've landed a system that I think personally is deadly. I think it's the best option. That's my opinion. And again, fully admitting that different people's hunting styles are different, species that they're hunting are different. I know Brady loves big glass, and, that's great. I just think for me, I'm going to make choices, and I think the choices I've made definitely suit my style of hunting, and it does everything that I need it to in the best way possible. With that, I'm going to jump into some statistics. So just for fun, I don't know how fun it was because it was a little bit depressing, to be honest, just thinking about the amount of money. But I wanted to run through costs just because I want to be as transparent as I can be with what a full, system of mine would be. Actually, before I do that, I'm gonna address one other question I got. So somebody else asked me why not the Swaro NL Pure. So they've introduced the NL Pure. They have that in a 14 by 52, which I would say is comparable to the SLC 56, 15 by 56. It's a phenomenal set of glass. You get a slightly better field of view. So the field of view in the NL Pure 14 by 52 is going to be 279 feet at 1,000 yards versus the 15 by 56 SLC, which is going to be 234 at 1,000 yards. So you get a slightly better field of view through those NL Pures. The Pures are actually a little bit heavier. They look a little smaller. According to the stat sheets that I looked at, you're going to be 2 pounds, 14 ounces for the NL Pure 14s versus 2 pounds, 10 ounces. So you're about 4 ounces, I guess, just a little under 4 ounces difference. So the SLCs are actually a little bit lighter. Although, having both of those in hand and kind of playing with them, I don't know that it necessarily feels that way, but according to the stats, that's what it tells me. I definitely can tell you that the ergonomics, I think, of the Pure binoculars a little bit better. Main reason. So the main reason is cost. So the cost of the NL Pure 10 by 52s is $3,849. So almost $4,000, which is a significant chunk of change, versus the SLC 15 by 56s, which is $2,699, which is by no means cheap. Still very expensive, but they're what, $1,000, $1,200 cheaper than the NL Pures. And at the time when I bought the SLC 15s, they were best in class glass for that magnification. And, they were a smidge cheaper, I want to say, at the time, still expensive, but, best in class at the time. And to be honest, I'm not sure that I see a $1,200 difference in benefit in updating at this stage for me. The Pures are, like I said, slightly larger field of view. I do think they're crisper, they're clear. I do think it's marginal. For my eyes, as bad as they are, to be honest, I still think I get really good results out of that SLC 15 by 56. So that's the primary reason why I don't have the Pures and I have the SLC 15s. The SLCs, I've actually had 2 different pairs of them. So this is a bit of an interesting story. It's probably been 6-7 years ago. I was thinking about, getting set up with this style of glassing system. And I thought, I would really like a set of 15 by 56s to be able to reach out in bigger country, especially for mule deer, because they can hide so well, or even coos deer. So I bought a pair and I loved them. And then at some point along the way, I probably wanted a new bow, or I probably wanted a new archery sight or something. So I got to thinking, I might be able to cut ways with those SLC 15s. So I sold them and, ended up buying some other gear. And, it didn't take me too long, maybe 1.5 years, 2 years of really missing those, that I saved up the money and I ended up buying another pair because they were just that important to me. And I just felt like I saw so much more game when I was out in the field that I decided to buy another pair. And that'll be the last time I part with them because, like I said, they're a pretty critical tool to my mid to late season glassing setup. So, bit of a backstory for me, but I love those things. Okay. So let's run through cost. So total cost. SIG Zulu 6s and a 12 by 42, the original version, you're going to be $999. So $1,000 pretty much. The Swaro SLC 15 by 56s, you're going to be $2,699. The Swaro ATS 20 by 60 by 65 spotting scope setup, you're going to be $3,098. The Zulu 8K rangefinder from SIG it's the Kilo. Yeah, the SIG Kilo 8K rangefinder, $1,499. The Tricer AD tripod legs, you're going to be $389. The Tricer LP pan head, you're going to be $219. Total cost on that setup, $8,903, which when I looked at that, I wanted to throw up a little bit in my mouth. It's a lot of money. I mean, you're talking almost $10,000 in optics that are going to go in your backpack. It's a lot of money. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It's a lot of money. And I think it's justifiable though, obviously, because I've got the setup and that's what I use. Admittedly, some of these I've been given. So the Zulu 6s, SIG is being a partner with us. Those were given to me. The rangefinder also, I'm fortunate enough, working in the industry, I was given that rangefinder. But a lot of the rest of it, I think the rest of it actually, I'm trying to remember, but I'm pretty sure the rest of it, I know I bought the SLCs, I bought the spotting scope, I bought the tripod legs, I believe, and the head. I'm trying to remember, but the whole cost, $8,903. It's a lot of money, but I wanted to give you guys that, be transparent with you of what it is that you're actually looking at if you're interested in getting a system similar to the way I'm set up. Obviously you're going to have to save your money probably, and probably have to piece that together over time. And again, I do think it's worth it. I think if you're into hunting and it's something that you want to do every single year, if you kind of base your lifestyle around it, there's really no better purchase, no dollar better spent than in good quality glass. There's something about parking yourself behind a tripod on a cool, crisp October, November morning and looking through a good set of binoculars mounted on a tripod and just starting to pick apart the landscape. When you start seeing, those mule deer kind of working up a big sagey finger ridge, and, you're able to see them with good clarity and track them, and then maybe throw your spotting scope on and do some digiscoping, get some video of it. It's really satisfying. It's really fun. It's something that I value very highly. It's really important to me in my life, and my health and my happiness. It's something I really enjoy. So for me, it's a justifiable cost. And then, like I said, longevity on these optics is really good. So, you're going to have them for years and years and years, and you're probably going to end up passing them down to, family or friends, to be honest. So that's the cost, is what it is, but I thought I would touch on that. Now, the second thing I wanted to touch on is weight. This was a common question from the video that I did. People asking me what a total weight setup of what I use is in my backpack. So the Zulu 6s on my chest harness, you're going to be 1 pound, 5.5 ounces. The SLC 15x56s, you're going to be 2 pounds, 10 ounces. The Swarovski spotting scope 20x60x65, all in, you're going to be 2 pounds, 15.3 ounces. The rangefinder SIG Kilo 8K, 7.5 ounces. The Tricer AD tripod legs, 2 pounds, 1 ounce. The Tricer LP pan head, 4.5 ounces. Which is it's really incredible. If you're talking about a tripod setup that's going to weigh 2 pounds, 5.5 ounces, for the stability that you get, that's a pretty incredible product, to be honest. So if you're looking for a new tripod, I would highly suggest take a good look at that Tricer, because it's a killer setup for not a lot of weight. The ASIAC bino clamp, which I didn't talk on cost. I want to say they're about $40, but the ASIAC bino tripod head adapter clamp that goes on my SLC binos is 0.3 ounces. So total optics weight setup is going to be 9 pounds, 12 ounces. So you're pushing 12 pounds. Now, the Zulu 6s I'm going to wear on my chest. I don't necessarily count that as pack weight per se. Those are, like I said, they're relatively lightweight. You're going to be 1 pound, 5.5 ounces. You're maybe a couple pounds in weight, to be honest, between those binoculars and the rangefinder that you're including in your chest rig. Stuff that goes in my pack. The bulk of that is going to be the spotting scope, which is almost 3 pounds. And then the SLC 15s, which are 2 pounds, 10 ounces. So you're basically 5 pounds, 10 ounces, somewhere in that neighborhood. Which again isn't lightweight, but the versatility that it gives me to find and also evaluate game, I think is completely worth it. And then the tripod, like I said, tripod is one of those areas where I've been able to cut some weight, being that they're only 2 pounds 5.5 ounces. So that's kind of the weight breakdown. I know guys were interested in that. Optics are fun. There's a lot of different options out there on the market from great companies, whether you're talking Sig, Swaro, Leica, Zeiss. One of the things that I would encourage people to do, especially if you're looking on spending really good money on set of optics, is if you can visit somewhere and look through them, because everybody's eyes are a little bit different. It's like the story that I told at the top end of the podcast where my brother went in to buy the Swaros and ended up walking out with a set of Leicas. I had a similar experience. I wanted the Swaro because I wanted the Swaro name, right? Everybody loves that green, eagle on their binos, right? As a status symbol. But when I looked through the Leica and I looked through the Swaro, the Leicas were better for me. And to be honest, if Leica made a 15 by 56 binocular that wasn't a range finding option, it would probably be my choice, to be honest, because the clarity in a Leica for me is a little bit better than it is a Swaro. It's the same thing with Zeiss. They all use different coatings, and different colors are going to pop through those different optics depending on the coatings that they use. For me, like I said, the Leicas are my very favorite. The Swaro is a very close, almost indistinguishable second. And then I would say the Zeiss after that for me. And then, like I said, the real advantage for those SIGs is the image stabilizing ability of those things. But I would say go and look through optics if you can. Look through the different versions that are out there and see what works best for you and your eyes. And then also, budget. Your budget constraints are definitely got to be part of the conversation. Another note on that, on budget, before I leave that topic altogether. I know that over the years I've bought a lot of gear, including optics, bought and sold. So I've had some Vortex stuff, bought it and used it, and it worked well. It worked well enough. And then, at some point I had saved some money, and I sold the Vortex or whatever it might be to then upgrade to, a better quality glass. Nothing wrong with that. I totally get it, because you want to go hunting and you probably only have as much money as you got. I will say, I wish I had maybe held off, maybe hustled a little harder, maybe found ways to make up more money to actually just all in, go with the best glass I could get. Because once you get behind really good glass, you understand why that stuff costs. And you also understand how incredible your experiences out there in the woods can be, how much more you can find when you have really good glass. So I would say save, borrow. I hate to say that. Hustle, maybe do what you got to do to just try to get into some top tier glass, because it really is a game changer. If I had some advice for my younger self, that's probably what I would tell myself. Do what you got to do. If you got to do some odd jobs, you got to take an odd job at night, whatever you got to do to be able to scrounge up a little bit of money to just get into the best glass. It's going to save you in the long run, and you're going to have better experiences in the field. So that'd be my advice. So that's kind of it for budget. Lastly, one of the things I wanted to talk about is, when people talk glassing setups or glassing systems, we're talking glass, we're talking brands and, magnifications and that kind of thing. Something that maybe doesn't get talked about as much although, there's enough content out there that, inevitably somebody's got a podcast or some YouTube videos about the next portion of this that I want to talk about. But as part of your glassing system, I think you need to think about being comfortable. And the reason I say that is because the longer you can put yourself in the field, the more comfortable you are in the field while you're glassing, the more you're going to feel like glassing, and the better off you're going to be, the more effective you're going to be. So, be there before light. I like to be there 15 minutes before first visible light, where you could act like that gray. I'm talking gray light, like really early. I like to start picking up animals that are moving. I like to glass the skylines. see what I can pick up. So be there early, stay super late, stay till after dark, till you can't possibly see anything more, because a lot of those times those deer or elk are only moving during those time frames. So in order to do that, especially late season, you have to have the ability to stay warm. So as part of this, I wanted to talk about is a glassing system, especially for mid to late season, is clothing and clothing systems and your ability to stay warm. A glassing pad is something that I definitely won't head out into the field without in those late season hunts. You want the ability to insulate your butt up off the ground. It's a lot more comfortable to provide yourself a little bit of padding as you're sitting. So definitely you should have a glassing pad. Like I said, it's something that I'll never, ever head out into the woods in October, November timeframe without. So get a good glassing pad. Along with that, down pants has been a big game changer for me, specifically for that time frame of year. You think you might be able to get away with it, and I certainly have, but you really start to notice how cold you get when just your legs get cold. So down pants are incredible at keeping you insulated and keeping you warm. I know that this last weekend, even last year when I took my he was 11 at the time, but I took a couple of pairs of down pants, one for me and one for him. And, kids get cold. They don't have a lot of extra body weight on them, not a lot of insulation naturally. So I was worried about him being warm, but I put a pair of good down pants, which was a Western Mountaineering flight pant. I put those on him. I took a lesser pair. But he was great, man. He was able to sit there, stay warm, stay engaged, even able to participate in glass. And it was cold. It was in the teens. So, a pair of down pants is paramount, in my opinion, for mid to late season glassing sessions. You'll be so much more warm and comfortable if you add a set to your system. Along with that, you need to have a good layering system. There's a lot of information out there as far as layering system goes. I won't dive all the way into that, but what I will say is I think you need a good heavy duty insulating down jacket. It's going to keep you warm. There's a lot of good ones on the market, whether you're talking the Sitka, the Kelvin, or, the Stone Glacier, Grumman. We're currently working on one, which I'm excited about. It's got 850 plus fill in it. And I think it's going to be awesome to help keep guys warm in the field during those late season hunts. But a good heavy duty down jacket is going to help keep you engaged, keep you warm a lot longer on the glass. So I would say get a good down jacket along with the down pants. Along with those, a couple of items also down that I would include are a set of down glassing mittens. So a set of down mittens allow you to keep your hands warm. My hands and my feet are always one of the worst to get cold when I'm glassing on a late season hunt. Down mittens are awesome. You can take one hand, stick it in your pocket. You take the other hand, you're glassing with it off your tripod. And if I can keep my fingers warm, man, I can glass a whole lot longer than I can without, because my hands get cold. So I would say a good set of down glassing mittens. I think KUIU makes a good set of down glassing mittens. The set that I have are just from a outdoor rec brand. So Outdoor Research makes a set of down mittens, which I've been using for a bunch of years, and they've worked awesome. Sitka makes some, insulated mittens, which are great also. So I would say think about adding those to your kit. Along with that, one of the absolute game changers for me has been down booties. So you can think about late season hunting. You're out hiking to get up to your glassing point. My feet sweat a lot. So it seems like I wet my sock and my boot out from the inside just from perspiration. And then I get up to a glassing point. Even if my boots are insulated, it feels like once I get stagnant and I'm sitting there posted up on a knoll glassing for 2 or 3 hours, my toes get really, really cold. And so what I've done is I've pretty well just stayed with a non-insulated boot. So I'm not, wetting out added insulation from the inside. And I'm wearing those while I'm hiking. I'm getting up to my glassing point. I'm sitting down. I'm probably glassing for a little while. But as soon as I start to feel, it get a little bit cold in the end of my toes, I'm going to peel my boots off and I'm going to throw on a set of down booties. And there's different companies that make down booties. Again, KUIU makes a good set of down booties. The pair that I have is just a pair from Sierra Designs, I believe. Again, we're working on a down booty for glassing sessions, but those have been really, really big for me as far as keeping the two parts of my body that get cold the most, hands and my feet. And I can sit and glass a really long time if I got a set of down booties. If my feet are wet, and they are to a point where they are starting to get cold, even with a set of down booties, it's a great trick to just take one of those little Johnny hand warmer packets and shove them in the end of it that just sits right on the top of your toes inside your down booties. If you got that combination, man, you can sit for a really, really long time and glass effectively. So those are all items that you might not hear, talked about in someone's glassing system, but I think they're equally as important as the actual glass itself, because you have to have the ability to stay in the field and stay engaged. If you're shivering and you're cold, if your body temperature drops so much that you're like, man, I got to get up and move, you're not glassing, you're not finding animals. There's nothing worse than finding a big buck or a big bull and your teeth are just chattering in the spotting scope as you're sitting there trying to watch them because you just don't have the insulation that you need. So I would say, think about adding those types of items to your glassing setup, as well as the actual glass that you have in your packer and your chest rig. So that's kind of it for me today. That's my glassing system, a little bit more in detail, description and maybe some of the whys on what I choose. I'm really happy with my glassing setup right now. For me, like I said, I think it's the ultimate glassing setup for a variety of species, whether you're talking mule deer, elk, Coues deer. I think it's the perfect glassing setup. So that's it for me. If you guys have any other questions, you can shoot me a DM. You can drop a comment. I'd be happy to answer it. If you guys got any suggestions of, something that you think I missed, or maybe some little factor that I haven't thought about, or an item that you think I should try, drop a comment. I'd love to hear it. Everybody's a little bit different. But like I said, I wanted to give you the whys for me. And like I said, I think personally, I'm really happy and I have the ultimate glassing setup. So with that, that's the podcast for the week. We'll be back next week with a guest, and good luck hunting. Talked to a buddy today at the gas station. He and his kids are headed to Colorado tomorrow, I believe, for second season. You got third season on the back end of that. I'm looking forward to heading to Arizona to hunt some late season archery elk. And then, I'm really excited to get my 12-year-old out on a rifle elk tag down there. I know many of you have reached out and offered congratulations to my 12-year-old Owen for the good buck that he killed this last Saturday. Such a fun hunt. Had a really good time with him, and it was really neat to see him get his first big game animal. But I appreciate people that have reached out and the kind words. So I wish you well in return. I'm gonna take all the good things that you guys have said to me. I'm gonna flip it back on you. I'm gonna wish you guys good luck, and I hope you have good experiences on this late season. So with that, that's it, and we'll catch you next week.